Tired of Verizon gouging you for limited data? At T-Mobile, we're declaring the end of data limits. Introducing T-Mobile One. One price, all unlimited for everyone. Get 4 lines with unlimited LTE data on your smartphone for just $35 a line per month with AutoPay. Head to a store or call 1-800-T-Mobile.
On all plans during congestion, top 3% of data users greater than 28 gigabytes per month may notice reduced speeds until next bill cycle due to data prioritization. Video typically streams at 480p. Tethering at max 3G speeds. Discount via bill credit plus taxes and fees.
Blog Talk Radio.
The year, 1888. The place, London's East End. Dead and mutilated bodies are popping up all over, from Stamford to Whitechapel. Jack the Ripper is leaving his mark, and the city's on edge. Yvonne Mason is back with a tale of murder and millinery. The Rhodes Hat Factory is booming while the body count rises. Why now? How are these hats connected? Has the Hatter gone mad? Mad Hatter from Yvonne Mason. Available now on Amazon.com.
Oh, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is December the 21st. It is just a few more days before this whole silly season is over and we can move on to bigger and brighter things. This is Off the Chain. I'm your host, Yvonne Mason, with my co-host, Miss Ashley Fontaine. And I have to tell you, yes, it was a piece of shameless promotion, but it pales in comparison to my best Christmas present ever, 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 and that is my guest tonight. I have been trying to get this wonderful gentleman on my show for a couple of months now, and it finally came to fruition. I've been holding my breath, afraid something would go wrong and we'd have to cancel, but the stars smiled on me and the gods smiled on me, and I guess I've been living right because tonight my wonderful guest is best-selling award-winning author David Morrell, who is also known as Rambo's father. So those of you all that have seen the movie Rambo, First Blood, this is the guy that made it happen. He wrote the book. He is the award-winning author of First Blood, the novel in which Rambo was created. David holds a Ph.D. in American Literature from Penn State. He was a professor in the English department at the University of Iowa. His numerous best-selling novels include the classic espionage novel The Brotherhood of the Rose, the basis for the only television miniseries to air after a Super Bowl, an Edgar and Anthony finalist, an Inkpot McCavity and Nero recipient. David has 3 Bram Stoker Awards and ITW's Thriller Master Award. Bergeron, the world's largest conference for crime fiction readers and authors, gave him its Lifetime Achievement Award. His latest novel is a Victorian mystery thriller, Ruler of the Night. And ladies and gentlemen, this is how I came to meet David. My husband has been an avid reader of David's for years and years and years and years, and he said, Yvonne, David Morrell's got a new book out called Ruler of the Night. Get it for me. So I did. And David kindly sent me a advanced copy, and my Stars and Garters, I couldn't read it because I had to go back and read everything else, and now I am a reader for life. And David, thank you for being on my show and giving me the best Christmas present ever.
Well, thank you. I must say that's a pretty overwhelming introduction. So I'm sort of speechless, although I dare not be on radio. But and by the way, that's a pretty cool trailer. That the Mad Hatter trailer, that was really neat. Very, very well done. Very, very intriguing and well produced. It made me wonder why I didn't have one. That I didn't make one up. So it was pretty cool.
Well, I can hook you up with the gentleman that did that because he does a lot of my trailers, and I know he would be happy to do some for you because he, as you know, he has an excellent voice.
Yeah, he does. Really.
So I can hook you. I can make it happen, David. Just tell me if you want it to happen.
Well, we'll yes, except that what I should have been doing is 3 months ago. So, but yeah, we'll talk.
Oh, it's never too late. Trust me. It's as a marketing guru, it is never too late. Is it, Ashley?
No, it's not. That is for sure. Anything and everything helps.
I haven't heard your dog yet, Ashley.
I know. I'm so surprised. But now that you've said that, of course, she's going to bark.
For people listening, I was warned that the dog might bark. So,
all right, David. So let's take a trip down memory lane, because inquiring minds, that would be you and Ashley and I and 6,000 of our closest friends heard worldwide on this show, want to know about David Morrell, and we don't want to know the cliff notes. What I want to know is, when you were young and you were trying to determine where you wanted to go in life, was being an author one of them?
This is a story that I tell a lot. It was the defining moment in my life. And anybody who knows me for 20 minutes will usually hear me talk about this. There was in the early 60s a television series called Route 66, and I took to that series in a way that is still pretty mysterious to me. The premise was two young men in a Corvette convertible driving across the United States, and the show said, in search of America and in search of themselves. And it was a very, very intriguing combination of action and ideas. Very hip. It was sort of an imitation of Jack Kerouac's On the Road, and very, very hip. And with it, I'm using language that's sort of dated, but is the way they talk. The way they talked on the show, busting out, moving on, things like that. And,
I watched that show. I love that show.
And it was filmed entirely on location across the United States. I was in Canada at the time. I was born and raised in Canada. I'm an American citizen now, but for much of my life I was a Canadian citizen. And I had a very tough life. I don't know how to put that. My father had died in combat. My mother could not take care of me and earn a living, so she put me in an orphanage. And after that, I lived on a Mennonite farm for a while. And then my mother remarried, but the guy she married didn't like kids, and there was a lot of fighting. And I grew up in an atmosphere of abandonment and fear. And I used to sleep under my bed, listening to my stepfather and my mother argue, and I told stories to myself in the dark. So we skip ahead. I'd sort of forgotten that part of my life until I watched Route 66, and I noticed that each week the same man wrote the script. There were occasions when he did not, but for the most he did, and it was a very unusual name, so it was easy to remember it once I noticed it. As his name was Sterling Silliphant. And Sterling eventually received an Oscar for adapting John Ball's novel In the Heat of the Night, and he wrote many of the biggest movies, The Towering Inferno, The Poseidon Adventure, and things like that. But at that time he was a TV writer, and I don't say that, like that it was less than anything else. I always wished I'd had a career in television. In any case, after about 10 episodes, I made the decision to be a writer. And I wanted to be Sterling Silliphant. And I wrote him, I went to a library. If any librarians are listening, a librarian, really made a difference in my life. I wanted to find the address for Screen Gems, which was the production company mentioned at the end of each show. And this wonderful librarian, I thought it was an impossible task, and she got me the address for Screen Gems, and I wrote a handwritten letter to Sterling Silliphant, and I just told him I wanted to be him. And clearly, in a way, in retrospect, I was looking for a father figure, and he wrote back within a week, and I still have the letter. It was it was double-sided, single-spaced. I have it framed next to my desk. And he just told me, what the secret was, which was to write and write and write and write and write and never stop. And it changed my life. There was some question whether I would not finish high school. Instead, I decided to go to college and learn about writing and learn the best of what had been written. And just to shorten the story, many years later, Sterling and I met And we had been correspondents. I sent him letters over the years, but when in 1985 he said to me, "Hey, we've never met. Why don't you come out to L.A. and we'll hang around on the 4th of July weekend?" And I did. And he went to NBC and said, "David's got this novel called The Brotherhood of the Rose that I think would be a hell of a miniseries." And they agreed. And when the show aired, it was the only miniseries after a Super Bowl ever. And when the show aired in 1989, he was the executive producer. So he and I actually got to work together. And it was easily the most it was the most significant arc in my life. Just to have, there's hardly a day goes by that I don't think about him. He's sort of my, I wouldn't be anywhere without him.
So, David, it would be safe to say, and Ashley, chime in, it would be safe to say that you pursued a dream, irregardless of what personally was going on in your life. You pursued that dream, and everything that you did was focused towards that dream, and that was to be your hero. Yeah,
and it's a good question because, in effect, again, and it might be that, this conversation will wind up being a little self-psychoanalytic because, I use those words busting out and moving on, and clearly the theme of the show, because I didn't like my life. I was drowning. I didn't know. I played pool a lot, and I watched 12 hours of television a night and a day, and I needed rescuing, and Sterling wound up being the rescuer, and I think what was going on in my head is that escape that the show represented of moving forward towards whatever ill-defined goal, but at least moving forward, was what motivated me, and I never looked back, and God knows writing is hard work, and it's not like digging ditches, but it's a different kind of work, and part of the work is the ability to suffer rejection. It's the ability to question yourself and doubt yourself and get beyond the doubt in order to produce something that you're proud of. And, in the midst, there's every reason in the world for people to tell you to stop, and it's very, very rare and unique for authors. The ones who persist, are rare, and anyhow, that was in a way, my goal was to get out of whatever circumstance was weighing me down. So I never looked back because I had the determination. The determination was so rock solid that I told myself I can't be stopped.
Ashley, I know you've got a burning question.
Yes, actually I do. When you talked about that, obviously you've known for since you were young that this is what you wanted to do, and you worked toward that goal, which I commend you. There's a lot of us like me out there that didn't know that this is what the cards had in store for us until later in life. So I think that piece of advice about never giving up and pursuing that dream and knowing that you're going to have to deal with rejection is something that so many writers need to hear, because that happens all the time. And I don't know anybody that doesn't have that moment when that rejection comes and thinks, what am I doing? This was a mistake. I can't do this. And then the self-doubt takes in. But when you persevere and go past it, you, just like anything else, no matter what you do for a living, you come out stronger on the other side. And obviously you took that to a whole new level.
Yeah, it was pretty extreme. But you had a question out of that?
I had, yes, I guess really my question is, if you were giving advice to a new writer, like a student in your class,
yes,
or someone that you saw that had potential, but didn't even really know that they did, what would you tell them? What would you say to mentor them to go into this as a profession?
Well, I usually have two practical. I have a couple of mantras. I do teach writing, and at various conferences and sometimes at colleges. The first two are practical in terms of how do you establish yourself as a writer that people recognize. So the one mantra is be a first-rate version of yourself and not a second-rate version of another writer. Don't imitate. The second is don't chase the market, because you're always going to see its backside. You cannot catch up to the market. You have to create your own market. But the third one, which is more appropriate to what you are talking about, is I tell them you must want the career almost more than life itself. It requires...
David, you've been in my head. David, you have been inside of my head for years.
Okay.
Because those are the things. Ashley will tell you, those three things are what I tell people that I meet that want to write. Right, Ashley?
And you know,
exactly.
The e-book, prior to the e-book revolution in 2009, there were e-books before, but 2009 was the year. Prior, and it's only been 7 years, but look at how everything changed. Prior to that, and I would even go back when I started, I used a manual typewriter. And you had to have the determination to type the first draft, correct it, type the second draft and correct it, and, type again and again and again. Now, I'm a pretty fast typer, so I can do about 80 words a minute. And then electric typewriters came along. It was just a little bit easier, and so, more people maybe were willing to try it. And then with computers, of course, it became even easier, the physical part of it and the revising part of it. And then with e-books, people didn't need an agent. They didn't need an editor, although they really do, and they should have an agent. Well, perhaps not an agent, depending on some circumstances, but for certain, an editor. And so I think what's happened is that it got easier. So people don't know perhaps what we mean when we say you must want it almost more than life itself. Day after day to type, just the physical. Typing on a computer isn't any big deal, but those manual typewriters, there was a physical work to it that I know prevented a lot of people from going the distance. They just didn't want to make the effort. But now it's easy to make the effort, and what you've got now is such competition that it's a different kind of stress. And everybody's shouting, and it seems as if most authors are now trying for niche audiences. That struggle and that doubt. Every morning when I go to work, I'm so excited because I was so excited by what I wrote the day before. But then when I read what I wrote the day before, I realize, oh my God, I got to revise it because it isn't what I thought it was. Because the excitement of the first draft doesn't carry through into the reading of the first draft. And so there's always that it isn't good enough, it's got to be better feeling. And I love to tell this story that Neil Simon tells. People don't talk about Neil Simon much anymore, but he was a famed playwright. I mean, probably the most successful American playwright ever. And he was at a playwrights workshop. He was working with some young playwrights, and a young man said, I realize I have a problem in the second act, but I think I can hide it and nobody will notice it. And Simon yells, not notice, even when it's good, it isn't good.
And therein lies the truth, because
therein lies the truth. It's never good enough, so you try harder and harder. And if you're honest and you really want to go the distance and have a career of substance, instead of writing because you think you're going to win the lottery, that requires a steely resolve that not a lot of writers, even now, as easy as it is in terms of physicality and the ability to get your word looked at by other people, it still requires that something extra.
Exactly. And it also requires, I'm sorry, Yvonne, go ahead.
No, go ahead, baby.
I was just going to say it also requires a thick skin. And that's something that I wish someone would have told me when I first started this, because I don't know about you, but I know that I consider my work my babies. It's something that I created, and you just like when you have a child and you raise it, and that's your baby, and then you release it out into the world to be on their own. You don't want anybody hurting your child or saying anything negative about them, but that's the way life is, and it's the same way with books. That's your baby. You put all your effort into this story, and at that point in your life, you did the best you could with it, that point that you're at. And then all of a sudden, you get accolades, whatever, but then there's just, I don't know about you, but I always remember the negative ones. They stick more than the positive comments, and they stick really hard. Do you still, even after all your success, do you still suffer with that when you read something negative about what you've written?
Well, I am blessed that I've been able to get the majority of my books are reviewed positively, but every once in a while there's something that baffles me and makes me wonder, who is out there. I wrote a novel called Murder is a Fine Art, and it's the first of my Victorian mystery thrillers. I wrote 3 of them. And so we've got a book called Murder is a Fine Art, and it's the background of the novel has to do with the first media sensation, the first publicized mass murders in English history, which were not Jack the Ripper, which you know about, Yvonne, but were way back in 1811 with the ability for newspapers and the newly improved mail coach system to spread news throughout England in 2 days. These grisly murders were publicized in a way that had not been before, and so I had written the first scene of the book was the murders, because I wanted to show how these murders could have been so horrifying that they did paralyze England. So, all right, here we go. So the book is called Murder is a Fine Art, right? And so somebody on Amazon said they gave it 1 star. Thank God there weren't many, but gave it 1 star because, are you ready for this? There was too much murder in it.
Oh, my Lord.
In a murder mystery book.
Yeah.
There were too many
murders.
murders.
Murder is a Fine Art. So, clearly what happens a lot is that critics, I was taught that a critic should try to figure out what the author was trying to do, which is not always easy, but we get a sense of what kind of book it is and how well then the author achieved those intentions. But too many people these days are narcissists who think that if they didn't like the book, that means the book isn't any good, when all it means is that the book wasn't for them.
Exactly.
But they go ahead and again in this mass media world where every idiot can broadcast foolishness along with people who have wiser heads, and it's a form of narcissism, and they just carry on as if their opinion is what everybody else should have, and they broadcast it in a way they shout it, so to speak, as if just because it came from them it's gospel. So it's a little frustrating, and you have to get used to that. What hurts is if somebody is really smart and knows what criticism is and knows the principles of it and maybe finds some stuff that you say, oh my God, I wish I'd thought of that, then that hurts. But fortunately, I don't get a lot of it, but it happens, and that's how you learn.
Let's go back.
That is so true.
Let's go back to Murder is a Fine Art, because that segues
let's go back to murder.
Yeah, my favorite subject.
Yes.
Because that segues into one of my questions on my notes, and that is, when you research that book, and shame on that person that says it's too full of murder. Obviously, they were not well educated. Yeah, exactly. Or they were into romance or something. Who the hell knows? But their opinion is like something else. We all have one.
Right.
But what people do not understand, what readers do not understand, and this was one of the many reasons that I loved these 3 books that you wrote. Thank God for my husband turning me on to you. is because not only did you write a murder mystery, but you wrote a murder mystery at a time in England when it was a Victorian period. The upper crust that was not talked about in polite company, and you had to blend the culture, the time period, the history of the time period, your main character, all into a historical fiction, which took you a long time to research to get it right. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, it took me. The research was it's been a 7-year project, but for the 3 books. But the first book, the research took me 2 years, and I do not lie when I say this. to hypnotize myself into thinking I was on those harrowing fog-bound streets. I did not read any books that were not related to 1850s London or to my main character, Thomas de Quincey, who was a real person known in his day as the Opium Eater, or, London at the time or a history, Victorian history. I set about to give myself an education that would allow me, if I needed to lecture about it, because I, as an American, and known mostly from my contemporary work, and also as the creator of Rambo in First Blood, the novel 45 years ago, I knew that there would be people in wait for me to make mistakes. So I thought the only way I was going to do this is if I so became an expert that I would try to convince readers they were truly on those streets. And so the goal was a big one. And what was going on in the background is that my granddaughter, Natalie, who was 14, had died in 2009. And I was in a very bad way, and I wanted to escape. And the idea of these Victorian mystery thrillers, I'm known for action and suspense, and I thought, all right, let me see if I can't give the same kind of excitement and suspense in 1850s London as I could in 2016 New York City, and do it in a way that allowed me to escape. So for these years, it was almost using that psychoanalytic thing again. The book saved my psyche by allowing me to convince myself that I was in another time. And it was just a real thrill ride to be able, because those were frightening times and very they were scary, and it was almost like going to Mars. And I thought, this is so cool. The hardest thing I find after 45 years running thrillers is how to change it up and find new ways to do it so that it feels fresh, not only to the readers but to me. So it was just a lot of. It had to be done for real. It had to be done accurately, or else it wouldn't have worked. And I have this big map of 1851 London. It's not 54 or 55, which I wrote about, but 51, close enough. And I got so I could get around on that map as if I lived there. And in fact, my wife was astonished when 2014, I believe it was, when we were in London doing some research, and I was able, without a guidebook, and I've not been there often, but without a guidebook, from memory of the 1851 map, to get us around to where we ought to be. So it was very enveloping.
Well, let's and before I ask the next question, I just want to briefly say one more thing you and I have in common. You lost your granddaughter at 14. I lost mine at 13 last July.
Oh, dear. That's very recent. Oh, I'm so sorry.
So just one more thing that you were meant to be on this radio show. Right, Ashley?
Exactly.
So
what happened to your granddaughter?
She died of an asthma attack.
Oh, my God.
She went into cardiac arrest.
I've written about grief a lot, and I've given talks to numerous grief organizations, including the Compassionate Friends. Whenever I hear a story like what you just said, the Compassionate Friends is the world's largest organization for parents, grandparents, and siblings of dead children. And my wife and our son died from the same disease that killed our granddaughter. And my wife and I probably would have, I don't know what we would have done if we hadn't known about the Compassionate Friends. And they have chapters in many American cities. And I don't know how you're, dealing with it, or how your husband is, or how, the poor child's parents are, but I just, I interrupt here to tell you about this organization, which I feel very strongly about. And as I said, I've given numerous talks, keynote addresses to their national conferences. So anyway, I just wanted to put that in.
That's perfect. I love it,
because
one of my questions to you is what are your passions and charities that you're passionate about, and that just segued into it nicely. And yes, I will be getting with you because I want my daughter and her family to get some grief counseling and to get some support up where they live.
In addition, I wrote a novel about grief called Fireflies. Not a novel, I'm sorry. It's a nonfiction. It's about what happened to our family, and then my thoughts about grief and how it affected me. And in particular, whenever I give talks to these organizations, the first thing I ask is, how are your panic attacks coming? And that always gets a laugh because they know what I'm talking about. They're all having panic attacks. And I'll afterward, I'll try to, we'll figure out how I can get a copy of the book to the girl's parents. If you think that would be appropriate. If you think that would be appropriate. I give all the money away. It's not like there's a lot of money comes in from a book like this, but I give it to a fund in my son's name, a cancer fund. So, I'm not hawking anything here, but I do, the e-book is very up to date. If they read e-books, it would be easier to give it to them that way. See,
again, best Christmas present ever.
Exactly.
I keep saying that,
Agreed.
David, but it is. This is the best Christmas present ever.
Well,
and
it's a life-changing. We're way off topic in a way, but this is real life. This is what for me was the transforming in the worst sense. If Route 66, made my life. The death of my son and my granddaughter destroyed part of me, and Matt died in 1987. I'm still not over it. I think about it.
And you never will be.
That's right. In the United States, people want to hurry grief along, and they minimize it. It's rather pathetic in its way. The way people who are not in pain brush off people who are. But we'll do something about it. So enough of the somber stuff at this time of the year. Let's move on.
Let's talk about.
But you know what? Well, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's so, as a writer, and it sounds like you're in the same boat. When something comes along in our life, whatever muse it is, whether it's an experience that we've had, or, just something that we've seen, that's what ends up pushing us into the next book thing that we're going to write about. And in your case, it was that. In mine, it was I'm the parent of a recovering drug addict. And so that has pushed me, I normally wrote mystery thrillers, but because of the situation that I've gone through with my son, it's pushed me to write different in terms of the genre that most people know me for, and write about things that were personal to me, but in a fictional way. And It was amazing how when that happened, it really resonated with a lot of people because you realize you're not the only one going through this. Same thing with grief. When you open your heart as a writer and you pour it out, it's amazing how it touches the souls of other people. And that, for me, I don't know about for you, but for me, that's the biggest achievement of being a writer, is knowing that what came out of your head affected another person's life.
And they noticed. Go ahead, finish.
I was just going to say that's the greatest joy for me.
They notice the conviction. When I teach writing, I know some writers who this just drives me nuts when I go to writers' conferences and I see somebody else talking to the students and talking about product and branding and platforming and things of that nature. The cynical manipulation of the ability to tell a story in order to pander to people. And it drives me nuts when people talk that way. And my own view of this has been that we as authors have an obligation to ourselves, if to nobody else, to use our craft in order, with each book, to make us fuller, bigger people, more evolved, more moving ahead. We go back to that Route 66 metaphor. And so what I tell my students is that we should write in such a way that if somebody were to read our books in chronological order, what they would know, they would see the shifts and the growths, or that's often a metaphoric growth. I mean, it's often, death and grief aren't exactly a growth, but they did change us, and to make us, the road that we took. So the way I put it, some people have found this to be a valuable statement, is that our books should be the autobiography of our souls. And that fits as much as if you're writing misty thrillers as if you're writing the great American novel. If you write from your heart, readers will feel the integrity and the intensity of what it is you're trying to say.
And that is very true. Very, very true. And that brings me back to Thomas De Quincey. We got to talk about De Quincey because he won't shut up in my head, and it's your fault, David. It's not your fault.
Well, he took me over. I felt as if I was being reincarnated. It was he's quite a guy.
He is. So explain to the readers that. All right, the first book was Murder is a True Art.
Murder is a Fine Art.
A Fine Art. The second book was
Inspector of the Dead, and then the third and the final one is Ruler of the Night.
And the main character in these books is Thomas De Quincey, and he was a real person. So pick up the story and tell the folks about Thomas De Quincey and why he is such a powerful character in these books.
Yeah. Well, it all goes back to my granddaughter's death in 2009. And my daughter, whose child it was that died, was understandably reading books about grief. And she had come across, and watching films on the subject, and she had come across a 2009 film called Creation, which is about Charles Darwin's nervous breakdown after his favorite daughter died. And he had, it was not only grief that obsessed him, but he had recommended a medical treatment that turned out to be maybe what killed her. So in addition to grief, he was feeling guilt. And it was a powerful experience for him. He had the terrible headaches. He had heart palpitations. He had serious stomach problems and serious bowel problems. And he couldn't get his breath. And he had boils and aches. And it was a mess. And no physician of the period, this is the 1850s, could identify a physical disease that encompassed all these symptoms. And we, of course, as moderns, recognize that the cause was psychological and not physical. And at near the end of the film, the climax involves a character coming to Darwin and saying, Charles, there are people like Thomas De Quincey who believe that we can be controlled by thoughts and emotions we don't know we have. And I remember my jaw dropping. I'm thinking, what on earth because this is Freudianism. This is the subconscious, and this is 1850s. Freud didn't publish till the end of the century. So were the filmmakers introducing a deliberate anachronism, or was there in fact a Thomas de Quincey who had predated Freud? And it turned out there was. I immediately set out to find out who the hell this guy was, and it turned out that in 1821 he had written a famous book about the first person writing about drug addiction, a book called Confessions of an English Opium Eater. And that's why he was called the opium eater for the rest of his life. And he was an opium addict at a time when opium was legal and cheap and readily available as a painkiller. And he'd had a toothache. He took some opium in the form of a brandy and powdered opium called laudanum, and he got hooked. And the nightmares he had because of the opium made him construct a theory about the human subconscious. There's a quote I'm going to give you. I intone it. I do it somewhat dramatically and slowly because it is such a riveting statement. He said that the human mind was composed of chasms and sunless abysses, layer upon layer, in which there are secret chambers where alien natures can hide undetected. And I freaked out. And I thought this guy would be so cool to write about. And what I envisioned was, and also he was an expert in mass murder, not that he killed people, but he was fascinated by it. And he had written the first true crime book that I can think of in the modern era about the Radcliffe Highway murders that I talked about earlier. And I thought, this is so cool. He's interested in mass murder. He understands the subconscious. What if he comes in contact with the newly formed Scotland Yard Detective Division, and they're happy that they're doing plaster casts of footprints. They think this is just, hey, aren't we on top of things? And he starts talking to them about the chasms and sunless abysses of the human mind. And they think he's just as crazy as can be, but somehow they're forced to work together. And I thought this was just such a cool idea that the theories of the subconscious, and I picked 1854 because that's when De Quincey published his true crime version of the Radcliffe Highway murders, and someone is repeating those murders using his essay as the blueprint. The more I learned about De Quincey, the more excited I became at how many innovations he'd introduced, and ways that he had changed English culture, and it was just very exciting. And I wound up. He has 23 volumes of prose, and I read them many times, and I got so I could quote from him in dialogue, real passages that actually sounded like dialogue in the novel. And I don't know, it was just great fun. I sometimes felt I was channeling him. But he's an utterly fascinating character.
Well, he won't get out of my head, and it's your fault.
Yeah, he'll do that. I mean, honest to God, I thought he was talking to me. He was so... And he's so funny. He once said he was a book reviewer, and he once said to an author, he said, "Sir, I enjoyed your book so much I almost finished it."
That is good.
It is good.
Well, even in the book, David, you give him such a sardonic, dry, sarcastic humor that I'm doing a double take because I think I'm talking to my own husband who has that same type of humor. And I'm going, no, this is De Quincey. It's not Jack. So, because Jack's asleep.
I didn't make up most of that. Almost all the jokes he makes come from his work.
Well,
oh, wow.
If you're laughing, it's because that he either said it or it happened to him. You know, you're reading about De Quincey, you just can't believe. And you know, he was 4'11". He was very little, and he lived, despite the opium, he lived to the age of 74. In the novels, he's 69. But, you know, Emerson, who admired him a great deal, Ralph Waldo Emerson, when he was on a tour of the England and Scotland, visited him in Edinburgh. Or rather, De Quincey visited him, and De Quincey showed up in his underwear soaking wet because as he was coming to meet Emerson, some kids assaulted him and stole his clothing. So he had to walk down his street in his underwear in order to meet Emerson.
When you put him in that church and he's sitting on the pew, and I get this vision. Now, ladies and gentlemen, like David said, the man was 4'11". The pews in these old churches were very, very high. So you have this 69-year-old man who was not a good-looking man, and he's sitting on this pew, and you have him swinging his feet like a child.
I think he's on the altar. I can't remember. It's been a while, but yeah, the murder has already been committed, and he's watching Scotland Yard go through its routine to try to solve it. And he's watching them all, and his daughter Emily, you know, sees him on the altar with his feet dangling.
Swinging his feet.
He comes over and get to grab him, and you know, what are you doing, Father? And I just have to laugh. He's one of I don't know. He really possessed me with his unique view of the world.
And he does not seem to get discombobulated when Scotland Yard, being Scotland Yard, tries to poo-poo him. He just continues on in his vein like he didn't even hear him.
Yeah, no, it's a private world. He was De Quincey was an expert in a German philosopher called Immanuel Kant, and Kant believed the great question that Kant asks is, see, here we are just before Christmas talking German philosophy. The great question that Kant asked was, is there a reality outside us, or do our thoughts, our ideas, interpret the reality so that we see what isn't there but we think is there? And at one point in the novel, De Quincey comes in and with Scotland Yard, and it's a tavern where multiple murder has been committed. Brutal one, and Scotland Yard's aghast, and De Quincey says, "I'll solve it for you using the theories of Immanuel Kant." And you know, they're thinking like, well, you know, that he's being a nutcase again, and he says, you know, is reality outside us or in our head? And he says, let me give you an example. Does the sun rise? Does the sun set? And they say, of course it does. And he said, but it does not set. The sun is steady in the sky. It is the earth that turns. So when we use sun's rise and set, we are actually describing something that is not in fact happening. Is the sky above us, he says, and the Scotland Yard people say, of course it's above it. And he says, no, it is not above us. Only if we were in the Arctic Circle would the sky be above us, that we are standing sideways on the planet, and the sky is across from us, not above us. The illusion, gravity creates the illusion that we're standing straight up. These are the kinds of ideas then that he employs to show them that what they take for granted, what they're seeing, is not in fact what they're seeing. And he shows them a different way of interpreting it and solves the crime. So this, to me, was just immensely great fun, and maybe to make the reader's head spin a little bit, too, because we take so much for granted because of the language we use, and in fact, a lot of it is not, in fact, physically true. So there we are. That's pretty heavy.
And the same can be said. And as I was reading that particular scene, and because my background is in criminal justice, the same can be said if you have 10 people at a train wreck, you're going to get 10 different eyewitness accounts. Did they not see it, or did they see it and interpret it, as Quincey says, as they thought they saw it? It's the same premise.
Yeah, you know, I read something over the weekend a study by Harvard or Yale University in which they determined that novel reading is one of the few ways where we can imagine the way someone else thinks and feels, so that we can be trained by reading novels to appreciate another person's viewpoint and to learn empathy. And I thought, holy cow, that's not only a great idea, but it's a true idea.
It is a truism. And my mother always says read with an open mind.
Yeah. Yeah,
because,
which these days we need a lot of, but
we
won't go there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Miss Ashley, we're getting down to the last 9 minutes. I told y'all this hour was going to go by too fast. Ashley, have you got a real quick question for David, and then I'm going to ask him a question. I'm going to get him to tell us where he can be found.
Yes, I do have a quick question. I have a movie that's coming out based on one of my books, and I'm super excited about that. So my question to you is,
tell. What is it? What is it?
No, that's for a later date. You can look it up. It's not about me. It's about you. But I want to know what it felt like for you as the person that created Rambo. What was it like when you saw your words on the screen?
Well, I didn't exactly see my words, and I wrote the First Blood in '72. The movie came out in '82, and so I had a chance to be seasoned. I mean, I've known some people who had movies come out and it drove them crazy. They became so self-important. Not everybody, but it happens. It's a risk. And but with First Blood, it took 10 years, so I had very little expectations. And I saw the movie with my wife and then 2 children. On an afternoon where the distributor had allowed us, they just vacated a theater, and they wouldn't allow our friends to come in. Only the 4 of us could sit in this huge theater and see the movie with Sylvester Stallone, 50 feet tall on the screen. So it was a very weird experience, and I had no idea what to make of it. A friend phoned me later and said, "What did you think?" And I said, "I don't know what to think." And he said, "Well, is it a bad movie?" I said, "I don't think it's a bad movie. I just don't know if it's a good movie." And so what I did is I spoke to the theater manager, and I went to the theater shortly after the movie opened. He had a seat arranged for me, and I went to see it with an audience on a Friday night. And they went crazy, and it was again that reality outside us as opposed to in our minds. I had no idea what to think of the movie until I saw people go nuts watching it, but the movie, while it uses the same plot as the novel First Blood, interprets Rambo in a different way. And makes him a victim, whereas my character is very pissed off about what happened to him in Vietnam. So it's very interesting how you can take the same plot and make it different. And what I would advise, let's hope it's a great movie for you, Ashley. But the metaphor I used is that it's different train tracks. The novel is one train and the movie is another train, and they are going to be different. And the question is, if you can feel that the adaptation process was intelligent, and that the choices they made to take, let's say, 350 pages and reduce it to a 110-page screenplay, that the choices were legitimate. So you're going to have a great adventure. I mean, I'm very excited for you.
Well, thank you. I just was curious of what that was like, because I know that, it's nerve-wracking to think. And like you said, you're taking a big novel and you're turning it into a much smaller version and trying to.
Have you seen the film?
I have not seen the full version. I've seen part of it.
Yeah.
So I'm a little nervous.
Have the producers treated you all right?
Oh yeah. It's been a fun process. I got to help write the screenplay, so that was good.
Okay.
So
it isn't always a fun process. I mean, I did well with First Blood. I enjoyed the producers, but I have worked for some producers that were, it was very difficult because not everybody in Hollywood is smart. So
no, money tends to do that to people. It dumbs them down.
Yeah, well, some of them are in it for other for narcissistic reasons, because they want to be important. But I don't want to leave our conversation without emphasizing that the third book in this De Quincey group is called Ruler of the Night, and each of them has a major crime. So the first one, Murder is a Fine Art, was about the Radcliffe Highway murders. The second one, Inspector of the Dead, was about the numerous attempts in real life to assassinate Queen Victoria. And the third one's about the first murder on an English train. And while that might sound a little bit like Agatha Christie, once we realize that trains were quite different back then, they did not have a central corridor. They were composed of small compartments with room for only 8 people, and the doors were locked. So if you were in there with another person, and that person attacked you, as happened in real life for the first time, the unthinkable, there was nothing you could do and no help you could obtain. And the line I use is that on a Victorian train, no one could hear you scream.
There you go. Now, real quick, David, because I don't want us to run out of time. And when the show cuts off, I don't want you to hang up because we're going to talk a few minutes, and they'll hear it in archives.
Yeah.
Tell them real quick where you can be found.
Yes, it's davidmorrell.net. My name is Morrell. davidmorrell.net, not .com, net. It's like the David Morrell Network of Readers. It's a very, very informative website. It's like a magazine. There's lots of stuff on it, and all kinds of freebies about writing, and there's a Rambo section, and there's just a lot of stuff there. And there's a way to contact me as well, and I answer all the emails myself. I do not have an assistant. I like to keep that personal contact. And also, I have a Facebook page. It's an author's page, not a friend's page. So if you go to the David Morrell author page, I visit there almost every day. It's a salon about books, movies, and music. We talk. It's an art. We talk about the things we're reading or listening to and watching. And occasionally I talk about what's happening with me, such as the break in the water line that these days that required 2 guys to be shoveling dirt all day long, and great fun. And a great expense. So it's very personal, and between the website and the Facebook page, and I'm on Twitter as well, but I find Twitter to be a little limiting because of the characters, the 120 characters. But so the message is a little more pointed on Twitter. There's lots of ways to, and on Facebook I answer it all myself, and on Twitter I do not have an assistant.
So, ladies and gentlemen, check him out. Tomorrow night, my weekly guest, Floyd Potts, and I will once again be having a dissertation and disagreements, but we will end up as friends, as we always do. David, best Christmas present ever.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you so much for being on my show. And, yes, I want to arrange for you to come back because we didn't cover half of my notes. We didn't.
I warned you that I chatter.
But that's okay. Ashley, my sweet friend, thank you for being my co-host. You've got to get David's books because you will just fall in love with them.
I sure will.
I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't read David Morrell, don't go now because you got to hear the rest of the show. But as soon as this show's over, take your happy little fingers over to Amazon and just download the daylights out of him because he not only writes about Victoria, England. Of course, he writes Rambo First Blood. He does comic books. He writes nonfiction. He does short stories, magazines, essays. He does Carnival.
Spy novels. Spy novels. Brotherhood of the Rose.
Yes, that is the miniseries. So, I mean, the man is absolutely amazing. And once his characters get in your head, they don't leave. So you have to keep feeding that drug. I mean, you become an addict for his books. What can I say?
You're very kind.
I'm very honest. Ashley will tell you I am very honest.
Yes, she is. Very much so.
So, and y'all, my audience, every time at the end of my show, this is what I say. If you have a dream, pursue it. I don't care if it's garbage collector. I don't care if it's President of the United States. or anything in between, because it's like David says, if you want something bad enough, you will do everything in your power to make that dream happen. Even at an early age as a child, if you want that dream, you know how to make it happen. We've had this discussion every single time. I am a believer in dreams. I am a believer in making dreams come true. Look at yours truly. Look at David. Look at Ashley. We all made our dreams real. So tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, Floyd Potts, that will be the last show until after the silly season. Love each other, like yourself, love yourself, believe. That's my new word for the week, believe, and then make it happen. So until then, and David, stay on the line, until then I'm going to say, see you tomorrow night.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right. Now, what I will do, David, is this show, when we hang up,
yes.
When we hang up, the show will go up into archives, and then when it goes up into archives, I'll send you the link. I'll put it on your page, and then I will download the show itself, and then when it archives, it automatically goes up on iTunes. It automatically goes up on Stitcher, and then when I upload it to Spreaker, it goes to YouTube, it goes to TuneIn Radio, it goes into FM.com, and then I upload it to SoundCloud, Mixcloud, Podcast.com, and Podomatic, and Hipcaster.
Wow.
Now, when I upload it to all of those podcasts, this show goes out all over the world.
Wow.
So you, my friend, will probably see a jump of sales in your books, and I am just so excited that you could come on tonight. This just means a whole lot to me.
Do you read ebooks?
Oh, yeah. My Kindle, I have 4 Kindles, and I carry them with me everywhere I go.
Well, what I'm going to do is gift you the ebook of Fireflies when I'll do it tomorrow morning. And then you can, do with it as you will. And if you think, I don't know how to do this, it's kind of sensitive. I don't want to impose upon the parents of your granddaughter.
She will love it. My daughter, I'm going to tell you about my daughter. I'm going to tell you a real quick story before. I will send you her address because she will be so appreciative. Nicholas Grabowski, who is a friend of mine, she and my granddaughter absolutely loved Michael Myers in Halloween. Well, Nicholas wrote Halloween 4. He sent her an autographed copy of Halloween 4 along with a bunch of other little stuff, and that is one of her most cherished treasures.
Well, the reason I'm thinking about an ebook is while there's a physical book, it's a 10-year-old edition, and it doesn't include the recent stuff that happened with my granddaughter, which I build on. So the book was written in '88, and I added to it incrementally over 10-year periods, and so there is no physical book. Maybe. Let me give some thought to this. There may. Now that I think of it, there is a physical book, but I don't. I'm getting a little confused here. I can't remember the different versions. It might be just as easy to give the ebook, but if you just warn her that I'm not trying to be presumptuous, but that if it was something that might be of interest.
My daughter is a true Southern woman, and when we're given a gift with love, we accept it with love, and it's not an imposition. Trust me, she is having the anxiety attacks that we talked about earlier in the show, and this Christmas this is the second Christmas, and it's really, really rough.
So then, because there's a section in this book called Panic Attack, in which I describe the panic attacks I went through, and also that phenomenon of if we'd only done this or if we'd only done that, the child would have survived. That's very common. I mean, it's a special hell, really. And eventually I talk about panic attacks in terms of the physiology, and a book that I recommend that people look at called The Anxiety Disease, which is very, very helpful. So maybe this will work out. Maybe this will be of use. And
it
of
will
course,
be.
it's very, for both of you, it's so very fresh. And, you know, it takes 2 or 3 years of scar tissue, emotional scar tissue, till you start trying to think you're leading a normal life. And then there's that whole thing about that we're not allowed to lead a normal life because if we loved our child, we'll be in perpetual pain to prove it. So there's a lot of self-destruction that grief can produce, and that's why the Compassionate Friends have such a wonderful name, because compassion is what the grief should be all about. And anyhow, I'll make sure you guys get this, and for whatever use it might be.
And there's a caveat to the baby's death, in that 6 weeks later my father died.
Yeah, so, which is just on top of everything else. In the grief universe, they have various sayings, and the death of a parent is the death of the past. The death of a spouse is the death of the present. Death of a child is the death of the future. And the consequences are that we look at them. The pain is equal, but we look at again reality and what we make of it. We see in the different ways we can say, well, okay, a parent. The parent was, lived a life, and so we can rationalize it a little better than when a child dies. But
unexpectedly at that. I mean, she literally died in her cousin's arms, and her father performed CPR on her. He's a trained first responder, and he performed CPR on her to try to keep her alive. Yeah. But the upside of that is that her heart was given to a 12-year-old girl.
Yes.
So she still lives.
Yeah, and that's very important. I mean, there's that sense of, well, at least something came out of this. It's so hard to get one's emotions wrapped. It takes years to settle down. But if she's having the panic attack, she's got to come to terms with that before anything.
I agree. I so agree. I'm telling you, David, you're a gift from God to me.
Well,
that's how much I appreciate.
I don't know what to say to that, but we try to do our best for one another.
And I am bringing you back. I'll send you some dates, and you tell me if they're good, and get you back. And every time you have a new release, let me know, because you've become one of my regulars now. I don't bring you on the show just once and forget about you. You've become one of the regulars, because there's so much more we can talk about.
Well, we do. There's a lot to talk about. I haven't written any fiction since May. I found it very harsh to come back from. I call it Victorian withdrawal, and there's a possibility that Ruler of the Night is the last book. I feel it's very odd emotions that I'm going through, trying to adjust to what to write about in the modern world, which is so confused and chaotic. And so I'm going through a little spell here.
I understand that totally, because when I finished the latest true crime, Justice for Cindy, I haven't been able to do anything since then, and I probably won't until after the first of the year, because you understand this, it takes everything we have.
It does. God help us. It does. And I just don't know. We do what we can, and life ain't easy sometimes.
It's just life. It's what we do with it.
Well, there's
it's
that.
It's neither
too.
hard nor easy. It's just life.
I get you.
But I'm gonna let you get off from here. I'm sure you have other things to do. But thank you so much
Well,
for
you're quite
spending
welcome,
this
and
hour with me.
Really, thank you for your enthusiasm.
And I will send you some dates, and we will do this.
Send me your daughter's email address.
I will. I will do that as
Okay.
soon as I get off from here.
And I'm because I have to go do something. It's getting toward dinner here, but tomorrow morning I'll send you Fireflies as an ebook.
All right. Well, go eat your dinner, and thank you, and Merry Christmas and Happy
Merry
New
Christmas
Year.
to you as well.
And I
Thank
will
you.
get you dates, and thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. Good. Happy holidays to you.
Good night, my friend.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Tired of Verizon gouging you for limited data? At T-Mobile, we're declaring the end of data limits. Introducing T-Mobile One. One price, all unlimited for everyone. Get 4 lines with unlimited LTE data on your smartphone for just $35 a line per month with AutoPay. Head to a store or call 1-800-T-Mobile.
On all plans during congestion, top 3% of data users greater than 28 gigabytes per month may notice reduced speeds until next bill cycle due to data prioritization. Video typically streams at 480p. Tethering at max 3G speeds. Discount via bill credit plus taxes and fees.